All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the early edition of Titled Tuesday. Chess.com is now hosting 2 Titled Tuesdays every Tuesday. We're in the second week of this. So, welcome, everybody. This is the first of 2 early edition right now. $250,000 plus in prizes. The second event will be in 6 hours. Hope you are all doing well today. And welcome to the big show. I'm International Master David Pruess. I'm going to help you to find your way through the wild madness that will be hours and hours of blitz chess. Right now, the question that was the subject of a recent poll and that is on many people's minds: will Hikaru Nakamura take advantage of a rest day at the FIDE Grand Prix in order to play this blitz tournament right here or the next one afterwards? We will find out in just 1 minute. He hasn't joined yet, but I did notice that a lot of the top guns joined this tournament in the last minute. Me, myself, I would have had my whole setup ready. You know, I would have had my green smoothie, my water, my quiet, my peace, kids tucked away somewhere, 15 minutes before the tournament, all set up and ready to go. I would click the join button an hour ago just to be sure I was in there. But these people, they can make those split-second decisions. They can wait till 7:59 is ticking down to click on that big orange button and get into the tournament. So we have to admire their skill and their sang-froid in every aspect of this chess game, which includes the off-the-board game. You can see now below me a list of some of the top players who are logged in here at the moment. The top seed right now is Mishanik, which is Alexei Sarana from Russia, about 20, maybe 20 and a half years old, something like that. Followed by Njal, who I don't yet know who that is. In 4th place, we see Jospim, who is Alcantara Martinez, who won the last time that I covered Titled Tuesday by defeating Hikaru in the last round. So we'll see. We've got World Championship contender Lachezis Q, Jan Nepomniachtchi, here in the tournament. Grishuk taking advantage of that rest day, trying to show up Hikaru with his grind. So we turn our attention from the classical chess that we have been watching. I imagine most of you have been watching classical chess the last 4 days. Yes? No? Yes? We turn our attention from classical to blitz for today. Tomorrow it will be right back to the FIDE Grand Prix, where Hikaru, who I don't see here, is in first place. And maybe that's a sign of taking it seriously, or maybe it's a sign of he's got other things to do. We'll see. Mishanik here looks like he's coming out of a symmetrical English with a mildly tricky position to play from the black side. You know, just a little bit worse with this backward pawn on d6. Michael chess, or Misha chess. Bishop on h2 looks well placed, although it's got no other square, so it's kind of stuck where it is. And knight e5, covering that d6 pawn with the idea that if white trades and black takes back with this pawn, the bishop on h2 is locked out. White would then have to play knight d5 to further transition the pawn structure by getting a passed pawn on d5. No, Alexei goes bishop e5, not pawn e5. He wants to leave Misha chess with weak dark squares on the king side. Misha chess says no, tries to fight for those squares with f4, and queen h4 comes in, looking at knight g3. What's wrong with queen e1? You would think you want to defend your dark squares, so what is going to be wrong with queen e1? We won't know, because Misha is here to fight. Doesn't play the simple move, goes for it with f5, kicking the bishop back. The most notable thing about this position is that Sarana has played the entire game in 10 seconds while Misha Chess has used slightly over half of their time. And that's probably the main problem with White's position is just the time situation. All right, and Ken hitting me up with the info I needed. Ken's the helper in my ear, telling us that Aram Hakobian is Njal. Good to know. Strong grandmaster from Armenia. And the knight comes into d5, where it is going to live for a moment. And first blood on the top 10 boards. Dropstone DP has taken out Adri Calderon. Or Adri Calderon. Let's see how it was done. With sort of an endgame checkmate. Well, also up a piece, huh? Knight f6. That'll relieve you of the knight on e7. Check. When the rook moves, removing the defender of the knight. When the rook moves, hits the check, grabs the piece, sets up the mating net, and that was our first blood. Back to Mishanik. Queens have been traded by queen f2, defending this g3 square in permanence. White's advantage is going to be a little bit small in this endgame. You know, Black's looking for a chance to trade the bishop for the knight, the bishop for the bishop, and then play knight against bad bishop in the endgame, which will, you know, amply compensate for the slight structural advantage. Now he gives White a chance to make the protected passer, and White has to go for it and does. Only 18 seconds left to make good on this. This black knight, if it were on d6, Black could play f6 and everything would be good. But here, this pawn is going to require the defense of the knight. Very, very nice move from Misha Chess. Can he pull it off in 17 seconds? Of course, we all think no. Outrated by 500 points. Oh, Mishanik gets the knight to d6. Serrana is sort of back in this game in saving mode. Plays h5 to try and provoke en passant. Bishop takes g6 would be crushing though, and White finds it. Oh no! With just 10 seconds on the clock. And now he's going to take the pawn on e4 to simplify. He doesn't have time to defend g5. He would like to, but he doesn't. And we go towards the endgame. Rook on e7, I imagine. Changing advantages. Take on a7. No. He goes for the h5 pawn. Knight f6 is going to defend that. Don't take it. Good call. Whew, 7 seconds left. The extra 2 minutes aren't going to help Mishanik too much at this point, but those 2 minutes were saved by putting so much time pressure on the opponent. White's position still looks plenty good. Oh, finds space for the bishop, but a move too late. He's going to have to go trade off and look for the draw. You would think that a master would not lose this position as White, even without time. Mishanik might lose it, though, after avoiding that trade. Oh, my goodness. He's just gambling on, like, Misha Chess to hang a rook under extreme time pressure. I don't know. That seems like an extreme risk. Rook to f6 or e6. I think it's just my internet connection. Now he sets up a pseudo mating net. Black can take the bishop. I can't see what's going on anymore. I'm sorry, folks. I think I'm the one with connection troubles. I don't think it's Mishanik or Misha Chess. But it looks like he did hang the piece like Mishanik was counting on here. And what a terrific lag storm. I am just dying in here. This one's done. This one's done. It looks like round one is just about done. Looks like round one is coming to an end right here. Robert Hess, however, still playing an endgame. Now with an extra queen. That's pretty handy. His opponent's unimpressed. As I recall, they've got a 1 second time increment here. Normally people play 3-0 or 3-2. In Titled Tuesday, they play 3-1. Black's hoping for some kind of a stalemate, but it's not going to happen. Hess left him with a 2-square prison cell, just to be sure. But Black plays rook g5 check, just to make sure that, you know, with 1 second that you're seeing the board right. Goes down there. And let's see if anyone else is left in round one. Yes, we've got the famous endgame rook and bishop versus rook. Much more interesting than king and rook versus king and rook, which was the endgame we saw several times last time. Here the black king is in no danger for the moment. Yep, checking back. Black's playing this quite confidently at the moment. The defense where the rook stays near the king so it can defend it. Oh, white can't even push this black king to the side of the board. Black really knows what they're doing. Really knows what they're doing. And making it tough for white. No progress at all. Oh, yeah. Kopolov showing us exactly how to play this endgame with 50 seconds on the clock. He's saying white's risking losing by flagging because he's so fast. And rook c5, just taking the rooks off the board. And we are into round two, folks. Round two gets set. And let's see if we can't pick out Grishuk's game, right? Let me try and purposely grab that. Here I've got Chesscom, another big name playing today, Fabiano Caruana. Let's see what Fabi's doing. He's facing somebody playing h6 and g5. Dude, you can't insult Fabi like this. Okay, I'm not, I don't spend my life playing blitz, but isn't it insulting to do this against Fabiano Caruana? I mean, mad inappropriate, I think. You can't play h6 against Fabi. No way. No way. Horrific position from black, as one would expect here. If they could move their h6, their h5 and g4 pawns back and replace them with 3 random development moves, they would only be slightly worse. But as it is, they're quite a bit worse. Okay, so here knight g6 is coming, and that's an awkward move for white to handle. So Fabi fights for control of the e5 square with bishop b5. It's logical, but it feels like if black plays bishop d7, white's just headed towards a trade that black should be comfortable with. Now, if the bishop retreats to g3, black has h4, so it doesn't look like he can retreat the bishop. It looks more like queen d2 or something like that might be coming. Maybe take on c6 first, but then black has bishop a6. Anita, you've got opening prep memorized for h6, g5. I don't think that Fabi does prepare for this. I think it's outside of the moves that he has to consider. I'm going to admit that black has some sort of a position now. I'm going to grudgingly and absolutely miserably and unhappily admit that black is kind of in the game. And black picks up Fabi's e5 pawn after laying siege to it. Wow. But some people saying Fabi not only has prep for this, but Fabi is saving his prep for h6, g5. Can't waste it on a blitz tournament where you might win, $500 or $1,000. You got to save it for a tournament with $100K on the line. The H pawn is being thrown. Kleinebierr is feeling very, very comfortable now, right? Looking for a checkmate on g2 eventually with queen f3. Here we're going to see knight e5, I suspect, is his plan, threatening knight f3 check. I think that's his idea, but we'll see. I mean, the queen doesn't really seem to have anywhere to go, so he might be forced into playing knight e5 whether or not he planned it. This is a scary moment. I think white might want to move the queen off of this knight f3 check theme. Could also try f4 here, a super complicated option. Black would probably just take it en passant. Scary moment for Fabi. Very scary moment for Fabi. And his time is ticking down. And I was only watching this to see Fabi punish this fellow Kleine beer for his insult against chess. And if it looks like Fabi is going to lose, I'm actually going to turn away. We're going to switch boards to not witness that, and then we can never say for sure what happened. So come on, Fabi, find something. Find something here. This fellow here doesn't play proper chess. On d4, knight f3 check, pawn takes, queen f3, and you're mated on g2. Oh yeah, black is definitely better now, Aquila Anguilla. Definitely better. It is an interesting position, Astrovix, and I appreciate you giving me some artistic direction here for the show. And I will sometimes listen to you, but not on this one. Looks like black might need to play f6 to protect that. That knight's in danger, but what can black do? Black could look for a checkmate on white's king. No. Wins the exchange. Fabi was ready for it, expected it. Brings the knight to e5. Queen d5 is a bit odd, but Fabi's position is also a bit odd. It doesn't... Not clear what he wants to do. Now he wants queen g5. He's trying to maybe threaten queen g5 here. The position is rough. I think black should develop the rook on a8. Probably to just d8. And does. And the idea is now to trade the bishop on e5 and then take on d3 and look around for back rank mates. But I guess Fabi will always have king g2, so it's not simple for black. Yeah. And now black thinking a lot. d4. Okay, anchoring things in. He's locked both black rooks out of the game for the moment. Has Fabi, so he's alive. I think f6 could have been played to try and sack a pawn and trade queens. Fabi cleans up one pawn, switches the rook to the c file, of course. f6. Yeah, I mean, you can't take on d4 because of queen e6. And Fabi looking... I mean, I guess he's looking fake confident. He's forced to play moves really fast here. He's got no choice. Queen e3 is good. If queen d4, you always want to have queen e6. Doesn't want to trade his d4 pawn for just the c6 pawn, although if he has to, he might. He does have to keep playing quite quickly. Yes! Lodges the bishop back on e5. Whew, come on. Come on, karma. Come on, karma. Next move, queen a3. I didn't even know what black was going to play, and I knew Fabi would play queen a3 next. All right. That's a little bit of a threat ski for Kleine beer, who's going to bring the king back to d7 to support c6, and has now lost his entire time advantage. The confidence is down. Fabi can't lift the rook because of back rank mate. They're just hanging in there the best he can for the moment, and it is just a deathly time scramble. Fabi could survive by taking on c6 in some cases. He's got queen back to e1 as they trade into a pure rook and pawn ending that is basically dead lost for Fabiano because of that back rank. He's going to have to go h3 and king h2, but he's going to have lost all his pawns by the time he digs out. Oh, Fabi, I don't see how to save it. Rook somewhere really weird. He's preventing king g3 with rook g8. So now Fabi's going to have to go like rook g1, king h3, h5. It's very slow. It's 2 steps at a time with his pawn. h7, he comes across. Rook takes, king takes, rook c7. And on rook c1, g1, the opponent seems to know what they're doing. I must click on another game. No, I can't in time. Oh. Oh, I'm weeping blood. I'm weeping blood. Grandmaster Howitzer, must be David Howell, if he's rated over 3,000 and he comes from the UK. He's now up a queen. And black again goes for the stalemate. Turns out it's not a stalemate, and then they resign. Grandelicious? Niels Grandelius playing the 2 knights, which should be winning. It's fun to have a massive knight in this kind of a position. Probably play rook to the 2nd rank, looking for the rook takes bishop trick, and white walks into it. So that simplifies matters. And let's look for a game without 2 extra knights now. A rook and pawn ending. How could we be so lucky? White is trying to draw a lost rook and pawn ending. With the king cut off here, it is the hopeless situation. Black just pushes the pawn straight down the board. And biostatistician says this is 100% a win for black. They're correct. See if anybody else is still fighting round 2. We've got one last game. The knight and bishop checkmate. Ooh, easy peasy. We're already in the corner. Bishop g4. The knight went the wrong way, but it'll find its way, I suppose. It should be headed to f1 here. Or you can do it this way, yep, with the knight on f3. All right, finds the way. That's the checkmate. Folks, that is the end of round 2. Let's take a quick look at the full standings here as round 3 gets underway. Okay, we'll put up Chesscom, who won last time, and let's go to the full standings and see if Chesscom is here among the players on 2 out of 2. He is. Nice. That wasn't like a guaranteed thing, but he is. He's on 2 out of 2. We've also noticing Jeffrey Xiong and Hans Niemann here in the top. Kirill Shevchenko. And Infernal, isn't that Vichugov? Let me see. No, Pankratov. Okay, Infernal is Pankratov. All right, but we're in a position, white with a maneuvering double king pawn, no quick d4. So whether it's a Ruy Lopez or an Italian game, it's actually the same thing at first. Some maneuvers. Here comes d4. Black's bishop on g7 is a setup that a lot of people like in the Ruy Lopez now, to be able to bring that dark square bishop to g7. And this game, Black was able to do it quite efficiently by starting with a Berlin, getting a d3 variation from Chesscom, and then playing sort of a delayed Steinitz into bringing the bishop to g7 in one move. Often in the Ruy Lopez, you have to play bishop e7, castles, rook e8, bishop f8, g6, and then bishop g7. It can take a while. But here, Black's got to it quickly. Nevertheless, White's position looks pretty solid. One thing I love here is that White has the bishop not on c1. The reason that I can't play the Ruy Lopez, well, there are multiple reasons why I can't play it. You know, chess class, time spent studying, the opening, practice, blah, 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 positional sense. But what I tell myself, what I tell myself is the reason I can't play the Ruy Lopez is because this bishop always sits on c1, and I just can't understand how to play chess without developing my pieces. That's just where my wires cross and blow up. Shout out to Pino in the Chess TV chat. I see you. I see you there. I remember back in the good old days where all the chat was in the chess.com TV chat, and I understand the purple screen has hurt that situation, but I've still got my eyes on you all. Okay, so we trade on to e5. There's a pawn on c3 and a knight on c6, which is a slightly favorable situation for white, and means that white can try to outpost pieces on d5, which black can't do as easily. Chesscom jumps on the chance to do so. Knight can come to c4 next, and if there's enough pressure on e5, black can never move this knight off of c6 and have time to play and have time to put a pawn there. So white can sort of fake use this as an outpost and put pressure on. Queen looks at a6. Is black gonna have to play something like knight b8 here? I mean, they're not going to want to play rook back to a8. Knight b8. It's true that in the King's Gambit, sometimes you have trouble developing the bishop on c1 as well, because the opponent has a defended pawn on f4. That is true. I just need to find a new way to bring out my pieces. I think, yeah. I think that's what we're hearing here. think we're hearing that David needs to figure out how to bring out the white pieces. It's not supposed to be an overwhelming challenge. But, okay, black chooses another weakness with a5 rather than retreating the knight. I keep expecting knight c4 from white here. Jocelyn getting a bit low on time, so I wonder what he's thinking about here. Goes for knight c4. The idea is to put pressure on e5. Here I think he's going to have to take that, and then the c3 pawn is attacked. So probably like rook a c1 or something. No, e5. Much better. Much better. Grabbing that space, controlling the dark squares, and this way the rook on a1 can go straight to d1. All the white pieces looking pretty decent. And one of the main plans for white in these positions is to go queen e4 and take the pawn on f4. So. Okay, bishop there. Going to probably trade off the bishop pair and centralize the queen. And now g5 has to be played, and now we are playing the King's Gambit. They finally transposed the game from the Spanish to the King's Gambit. And so far, Tiger v. Schlepp is hanging in there just fine. I mean, Grandmaster from the U.S. Who is Tiger v? Oops, sorry. Apologies, folks. Just going to quickly check. Gadakamsky. Oh, my God. We're watching Gadakamsky. No wonder this player has perfect chess class. Gadakamsky. Woo! Well, that makes it even more exciting to watch this, huh? Gadakamsky. So we've got a young blitz monster, winner of previous Title Tuesdays in Jospin, up against a world championship candidate in Gadakamsky, who's showing his positional class in this Ruy Lopez. The bishop on g7 is controlled at the moment. Yeah, Gada's would love a queen trade. Jocelyn would hate a queen trade here because black's king's a little bit funny and the rook and bishop coordinate well in the endgame. And also just Gada's so good at endgames. So in addition to the rook and bishop, Gadakamsky coordinates well with endgames. So we'll see what he's got. Puts the rook on the g file. It's looking good for black here right now to me. Just a little bit good. He defends the f7 pawn and tickles the b3 pawn. Pawn Jospin gives it to weaken the king. He's looking for knight g6, knight f8, queen h7 mate. Gada does not give it to him with rook f8, but the e pawn comes through. And queen d7, that pawn is suddenly winning the game. Gada's got no way to get back and defend e8. And in the final seconds of the game, we see why Jospin is rated over 3,000 in blitz chess, right? As he just seizes a tactical opportunity and pulls out this game. Here he is coming in for checkmate with rook g1. Queen h8 or knight h5. Knight h5 looks correct. Down to 9 seconds. Knight h5, king up. Queen d7, rook e1, and rook e4. And if king d5, there was queen f7. And that is the game. Wow, that was a titanic struggle. We were privileged to be there for this one. Let's see how Serrana's doing. 3 seconds left in the knight and pawn ending. White's got the central space and makes use of it. Black had the potential outside pass pawn with the h-pawn, and white has taken that off the board using their space. Pressure on the f5 pawn. Oh, a pawn trade is giving black great drawing chances. That was a slip from white. They should not have let the b3 pawn go if they had a way to avoid that. And Serrana comes in and seemingly saving this game quite easily. I don't see any winning chances for either player at the moment. Black's looking for knight d4 check, but even that, white played g5, so they would be in time with the race. That's the end of that game. It is drawn. Those players are definitely off their perfect scores. Abdusadarov is here. Yes! Let's go. Let's go, Nordybek. And he has just not gone there as the extra bishop won the pawn on f3. Oh, it's a battle between teammates. Izoria, I can cheer for black too. Zviad Izoria here. winning this endgame. This is a battle between two California unicorns from the Pro Chess League. So, what is that all about? Hanging the bishop horrendously. Sviad, oh no. Agony. A better plan for black would have been to just go after the a3 pawn with the rook and trade the light squared bishop on h7 whenever white's pawn went to h7, and then black could have won the rook and pawn ending. As it is, we will have a draw here, which of course is one of the better results possible between teammates. It still seems weird when somebody's got an extra bishop for them not to win the game, right? A little bit weird. But let's see who else is fighting to the end in round 3. We've got 2 games left. Dintman is no Dritman, but let's see what they've got. Knight and bishop. Black seems to just be queening a pawn. Why didn't white take it with their bishop? Hold on. We're going to need the replay. It's going so fast at this point. Pawn e2. No bishop takes e2. Okay, well, you're sure to lose like that, my friend. And you do. And that is it for round 3. And we are cleared for round 4. Let's check the big standings again to see what's going on here. Etienne Bacrot, another participant from the FIDE Grand Prix. Clearly using his rest day for some important preparation. To be fair, Bacrot no longer has a chance to win this FIDE, this stage of the FIDE Grand Prix, so he's welcome to play all the blitz that he likes. Hikaru, who has a very good chance to progress to the next round, is instead spending his day on something other than blitz chess. So, top standings so far: Indian Lad with 3 out of 3. Etienne Bacrot, who are watching, and Kleinebeer, the insult hogger of Caruana. Man, I hope that guy gets punished by somebody else today. Then we've got Gandhi Van Verdenote, Gawain Jones up there, and a FIDE master named Sparu, who I don't know. I want to see Sparu's skills. Excuse me for a second while I go find Sparu, my friends. This position is perfectly interesting. I actually like how black's defending this, but I want to find Sparu. I see so many players I want to watch. That's kind of like one of the problems here with this, right? Is there's so many people you want to watch. I can't find Sparu's game. Oh, there he is. Sparu. Up against Bahadur Jobava. Okay, that would be a good way to measure Sparu's class. This is looking like a Polish kid from the picture. And in an equal material endgame against Bahadur Jobava, an extremely strong grandmaster. So if the kid can hold his own in this kind of an endgame, then you know they've got some skills. Rook to the center. And I think around here you want to centralize your king as white. So my thought would be that you have to play f3, king f2. Now, of course, f3, knight f3 check, king f2 is not that good. Yeah, without Naka playing, you've got more chances of a surprise player winning. Naka did win both editions last week. All right, knight b6. There's one rook trade comes in. The black rook can't take back because of b7. So Sparu gains control of the d file. Can play f4 and bring the king towards the center. That's what I like to see. Or maybe... No, you can't go bishop e2 and trade it because of knight e3 check and knight takes c2. It would be nice to just trade that piece, honestly. Black's going to play king c7 soon to defend the b7 pawn and then be able to put the rook on this file. Look at that time advantage. You always see the higher rated players trying to bully the lower rated players on the clock early on in these things, right? They just say, like, I know so much about chess that if I play, the entire normal phase of this game in 10 seconds, I'll play more or less okay. And you can spend 2 minutes trying to keep up with what I know how to do. It's a form of bullying, right? To play that fast, Alex? Do you agree or disagree? Knight comes into c3. Looks like Jobava has untangled black's position, and now the knights are hopping around nicely. They're also putting like a wall around white's king. So Jobava grabs a pawn, and yeah, I gotta say, it's looking tough for Sparrow at this point. Jobava is a wizard with knights, by the way. Very, very, very strong knight maneuvering ability from a lifetime of playing Karl Khan's and Gurganidze structures. So here he comes, trying to expand the queenside pawn majority and make more space for his rook. He wants to follow up with a5 if the white knight doesn't go to a5. It goes to e5, which threatens f7. He'll be trading that off, and then he can either steal the d file or play a5. Yeah, he's in the business of pushing his passed pawn. I think a rook trade is completely winning for him, so he could play rook d8 and just absolutely say the game is over. White really can't do much of anything here with those double isolated pawns and the bishop. They can't compete with the knight, but g4 and h5 is the best plan. I highly recommend to any of you, if you ever get into this kind of a situation as white. Black should play c5 probably to make progress. That knight on a6 is bad, but if you're ever in this kind of a situation, play g4 and h5. You gotta bust your bishop out in some way and open a second front on the board and try and trade off all the pawns on the king side. If you can trade off everything on the king side, then there are scenarios where as your opponent's passed pawn comes down on the queen side, you can sack one piece for it and then still draw something like rook against rook and knight or something of that sort. So Sparrow doing that exactly and winning a pawn on the king side and nearly equalizing this endgame. So Jobava didn't handle it the best, and you know, his advantage is much smaller now. I mean, that's obvious to all of us, right? The pawn the pawn is gone, the extra pawn is gone, and white's bishop is a piece again. Jobava going for the queening and then gets behind the pawn. He's got to play the whole board still. The king on b6 is in lockup, which is not good. He might not be able to avoid that bishop for knight trade. Wow, he does. He does. Okay, he comes up with quite an idea. He's going to go after the c3 pawn. Oh! Wow, white keeps the e5 pawn. This is getting more intense and more intense. Push the king off the pawn for a moment, reroute the knight. He's got good knight hops, and white's down to 10 seconds here. This is where, you know, people traditionally hang a piece, right? Yeah, doesn't go to a square where the knight can check him. Knight comes to d4. Rook backing it up. Uh-oh. That knight just went somewhere bad. After I praised his knight hops, he has self-trapped the knight on c2. It's completely out of the game, and white's just queening. He's going to rush it back. I think white can take and play e7 because e2 is covered. Good lord. With just seconds on the clock, Sparrow. Queen e4 to g2 allows queening. Will Sparrow be able to figure this position out? Maybe not. Allows white to queen. What? That's a bizarre technical choice. Good job by Jobava to somehow create a bamboozling situation where he could save the game down a queen. And of course, 3-minute chess, still anything could happen. I mean, Jobava could queen another pawn maybe. Or get checkmated in 1 on b3. Oh my gosh. Folks, let's just quickly review this checkmate. So basically what happened is with the bishop cutting the king off here, he came here, bishop check. If the king comes back, there's check, and you can't get out of the way of the queen and pawn blocking your liberties. Like, there's nowhere for this to go. It just can't get out. So it's just devastating. So he came up in the game and got checkmated here. And Sparrow showing bad manners. Screaming, "That's right, baby," in the chat. Banned. You're gone. You're gone, Spar. You're off my list. That's so rude. You and Beardson can go play your own tournament for people without manners. Let's see if there are any games still going here in round 4. There are a couple. SEO Robert, specialist in search engine optimization, against Arseny Nestorov. These players both have 3 out of 3, by the way. And Black is trying to give a perpetual. Black has probably given up most dreams of winning this game. Ooh, they've run out of checks. What? That is weird. I thought the white king could have just hidden on h5 defending the pawn, but it runs to the other side of the board. This should be a fat old draw at this point. Can't trade queens. Queen b7 was winning right there, folks. Just to show you that anything can happen. Queen b7 for white, right? In between move check and the pawn with queen. And white does win. Black eventually falls into one version of these, right? And that's why these endgames, this queen and 1 pawn against queen endgame, it's generally a draw in classical chess and generally a loss in blitz chess, as you have just seen. So the tournament is about to go on pause when the 4th round ends. There's mate in 2 here, which is missed by Black. Struggling to deliver the checkmate, but should be able to do it eventually. White resigns, and that sends us to break. And as we go to break, let me just show you flash you the standings real quick. You can see that there are still more than 10 players with a perfect 4 out of 4, including Pavel Pankratov. So we will see you again in just a minute. Please check out this commercial for us. It will put 1/1000th of a pawn into chess.com's bank somewhere, which will go some ways towards this $250,000 in prizes, which is needed to sustain 2 Titled Tuesdays every Tuesday. All right, welcome back everybody to Titled Tuesday. We are on the break between round 4 and round 5 for just a couple more seconds. Here you can see a bunch of the players who have 4 out of 4, including Etienne Bacot. And here come the games for round 5. We had 2 requests in chat for who we wanted to see in round 5. And they were both for Indian players. One for Narayanan, Indian lad, and one for Arjun Erigaisi. So here he is. Gandhivam 2003, his birth year. Arjun Erigaisi here playing the Benoni without knight f6. Somehow he got the Benoni without knight f6. He's up against Pavel Pankratov here. Go away, Aqualungula. Not allowed. You can go to chess.bm, a separate channel. Twitch.tv/chessbm. And you can watch his game there. But here we are going to see Arjun Erigaisi's Benoni. I think now everybody knows who Arjun Erigaisi is, so he no longer requires any kind of introduction, right? I mean, Magnus told all of you the guy's going to be 2,700 in moments. So be prepared. Be prepared. Finally brings the knight to f6, but he's avoided all the worst lines in the Benoni where white cracks you with e5. So honestly, he seems to have already completely escaped his opening. Let's check the move order, folks. We got to do like Erigaisi, c5 here. So a 1 e6 move order. But then you also have to play the French defense. I don't know. I don't know if that's worth. But then other than that, yeah, just play the Benoni from this order. Normally you can't put this knight on d7 because you've got a knight on f6 and you just lose to e5. So he comes like this, gets the queenside expansion, puts the queen on b6, rook on e8. He's got knight g4 at will. And black's position is totally A-OK here. Yeah. And folks, if Grishuk is going to posterize Kleinebier, just let me know. Someone keep an eye on that for me. And if he's about to posterize him, let me know. We'll pop over there and see how Grishuk does. All right, white transfers the queen to h4. That is a clever maneuver. That is a clever maneuver. That's a great spot for the queen there. Putting some pressure on the black king. And whoa, exciting. Takes with the f-pawn. Now e4 is solid. Look how many black pieces were busy trying to say that e4 was a target. And Arjun has to completely revamp his game plan right here. He needs a completely new plan for what to do here. Brings the knight to h5. He was going to look to attack the dark squares here with, queen e7, maybe to f6, bishop h6. He's going to leave this knight as like an option for white. Just hoping that the dark squares are untenable for white if they ever take on c5. So Arjun's going to pretend, even if it loses a pawn, he's going to pretend he can just sort of ignore this square. Bishop e5. What's the plan on f4? Probably to take and then take on e4 with the knight and say that the white king is really weak once the e-file opens, which I think is true. I think is more or less true, but it's hard to judge in a classical game, much less in a blitz game. Pankratov, deep in thought. Bishop d4, trying to trade the dark squared bishop would be a more typical choice, but he says, like, look, you had to play bishop e5 on instinct, hoping that this knight e4 thing would be good enough, but you probably only spent so much time on it. I'm going to check you. He takes that moment to say, I'm going to double check, a choice or judgment here from black, because it's a big deal. If this is bad for black, it could be really, 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 really bad for black. So let's see how it goes. Now Arjun has to back up his decision here. It's tricky. Very tricky. It looks like he might need to play king g8. It's such a hard choice. Oh, he's going to get himself into real-time trouble right here. He retreats the e4 knight. Wow. Tough call. I mean, this was like incalculable under these like time circumstances. He spent 48 seconds. He worked his you-know-what off trying to find the right choice there. Queen f7 gives him a real breath of fresh air here with that queen d5 threat. And looking at rook trades. This can only help him a little bit. In the background, I see Jan Nepomniachtchi has beaten Sokidze. So Jan is now on 4 out of 5. We've got Indian Lad here in a rook endgame, losing to SEO Robert. Wow, Robert. Drops a pawn as we watch, though. Let's get back to our main game for this round. Queen f3 to defend d5 is what you missed, and then a rook trade. And he's looking for a second rook trade. And it looks like Arjun somehow survived the most scary moment here. Thanks, Mr. Art Brains. I'll steer clear of that. Rook g1. So queen d5 here is a very bad move because white can take back on d5 with the queen. So he moves the king off of that file, and that is what Pankratov was ready for. He says, we're going to unleash everything on this king. And Arjun says, if I get the queens off the board, then after fg6, I could maybe even take, but also just play h6 and play this endgame. As long as there aren't queens on the board, I'm willing to play this position. He definitely wanted h6 to keep his king defended, even in the endgame. That makes sense. It stops rook g5 as well, going after the knights. And now we've got 2 knights against 2 bishops. It's a glorious battle, 20 seconds each. Of course, I love Arjun Erigaisi, so going to be mildly rooting for him here. I think rook e2, bishop d1 was not immediately amazing, but knight e2 going after one of the bishops, yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. I think you can just take that one and then check and win the bishop on c2 here. Yep. He's taking that bishop, and that's going to be a winning advantage for black right here. Just push the b pawn home. No, he covers everything. He's in no rush. It's completely winning. Just cover everything and give the opponent time to resign. Indian Lad has lost to SEO Robert, who is the FIDE master on 5 out of 5. Let's give him a quick look. Jun Ming Seo. I don't know this player. Wow, but we're going to see them next round. We're going to watch them in action next round. Right now, 5 seconds for Jospam. 1 pawn each. It looks like it should be a draw, right? When it's down to 1 pawn each, but we've seen a lot of games not end in draws. The black king is badly placed. There's several ways to still lose this for black. Threatens that checkmate. Cuts him off. Cuts him off. This is a classic checkmate for rook and bishop versus rook if you ignore the knight and pawn. And Jospam's got it. Black didn't find the defense and simply loses right there. Okay, well, I've got another game still going here. Alexander Fier from Brazil with 3.5 out of 4. How's he doing here? Looks like he's got a lost king and pawn ending that he's saving. Wow. What presence of mind from Fier to save that. That was fantastic. He found the one way to trade into the king and pawn ending that looks lost and draw it. Queen g5 and take g6. You have done it. You have earned that half point. Mighty, mighty, mighty play, Fier. Bravo. Congrats to you, man. That was an impressive little save there. Let's see who else is still going on here. Rook versus knight and pawn on one side of the board is so hard to win. If that pawn were on f6 especially. Could he win with rook f4? He could. So that forces black to play e5. Now he's going to be able to give the check. And can he sack the g-pawn? Not yet. Kind of a Zugzwang there. Can he take it? I guess so. Ooh, I thought he would go king f5 first, but it comes out the same after black plays that knight h3 move. And there goes the h3 pawn. That was not a good pawn to give. That is going to be the end. This game will be drawn now. The knight can just come back towards its king. What? Gets behind the pawn, takes it, knight g4. Very nice h2, knight g4 idea from Shield there. That was like a cool little thing to realize that you can finish the game off with this little tactic, just pushing the pawn. Very nice. That's why I guess they didn't displace the white king. They wanted to just end that game with the with h3, h2 trick. Okay. Eragaisi, let's go! Oh, against Alexander Bortnik. I can't root against a unicorn. Much as I love Arjun Eragaisi, I'm going to have to root for both players in this game. Let's go white. Let's go black. Show us what you all got. A lot of fianchettos so far. All right. And Arjun throws the pawn to d5 to try and make the bishop on b7 bad. But Bortnik's got the c pawn and the e pawn with which to dig it out. Two good little shovels. So he's going to be okay here. Puts one in, trades it. And then goes for d6, not for e6 here. Interesting. I thought it would just be the move e6 at this point, but who knows. Eragaisi puts a knight on c6. That looks painful for black. That looks like immediate, extreme pain for black. Because there's almost like no scenario where you take this knight, right? The bishop gets too good. The pawn gets too good. Your pieces get pushed to weird squares. And black just looks brutalized by that. d6, knight d4, and then a normal developing move that you probably can't even play at this point. You probably can't even afford to play that. Probably have to defend the c6 square with like queen d7 or something. Man. Wow. So folks, beware. You guys saw how dangerous this got for white for black in like one move. d6, and then boom, the knight comes in. Oh man. You can lose entire games like this easily. Kicks him back. And now you can develop any piece you like, right? Bishop e3. Or whatever. Whew. Man. Bishop e3. Knight takes d5. Whoa. I didn't calculate anything, folks. It's too much for me. I'm just in a different mode. All right. Do you guys want me to calculate something? I could try. Knight check. If the knight had recaptured, bishop takes b7 was good. So the queen takes here. This pawn on b2 is hanging, but this is hanging. It's got to be traded first if black wants to win back the pawn. And then this pawn is indefensible after rook a d1. Rook a b1, bishop e5. And it's harder to win the pawn. You don't really want to play f4 and leave these two things hanging on the e file to black's queen. Leaves the rook hanging to go knight d6 and take on c8. Yeah, that's an extra pawn for white as well. So white's advantage came down to one pawn. I feel like they messed something up, letting that structure on c6 get broken up, because that was worth like a second pawn easily. White's position was completely winning before. Now it's an extra pawn and maybe, 50-50 whether you convert it or not. All right, old guy. Thanks for the advice. Since I haven't seen your hair, I don't know whether I want to take hair advice from you or not. But if you send a picture, then maybe I'll know whether or not you're an authority on haircuts. But Chesscom is playing, Dave. Yeah, Chesscom is playing. And is up at the top of this tournament. See, right here. 4 points out of 5. Half a point behind Gawain Jones in a wild game, but we're on this game here. Arjun with one extra pawn. Now the bishop versus knight. I think the bishop's slightly better than the knight. I think the bishop's slightly better than the knight on this board. If you took the two pawns off the queen side, though, then the knight might be better than the bishop. So it's a fine line here. It's a fine line. All right, knight goes to e4. The knight wants to be on a stable light square, by the way, which would be like f5, d5, e6. The thing about e4 is f3 is an easy move for white to play at some point, so the knight's not very stable here. You want to be on a light square, not a dark square, because if you're on a dark square, the bishop can attack you, and if you're on a dark square, you can't control the squares the bishop's controlling. So that's why you want to be on a light square, where you're sort of defending some of the squares this bishop's looking at. e6 covers the checkmates on g7, so that's one good option. f5 also covers the checkmate, covers the queen's approach, and takes away some squares from white's pieces. At the moment, a rook trade is probably okay for black, but they don't take it. I think a queen trade is losing for black, unfortunately. So that's why black can't really countenance, a knight d6, f5 kind of maneuver, because a queen trade would be probably just a lost endgame with the rook and the bishop on the open board. So, yeah. There's classy peoples everywhere, Wherever you go, you can find some. All right, the bishop retreats, giving Arjun the maximum number of squares for this queen to deliver a blow. And now at some point, the idea is going to be to play f3, I think, right? That's kind of like the main threat. And then depending where the knight goes, you either trade queens and try and win the endgame, or you play queen c3 and try to end it. Bortnick's struggling to find an option, backs up the knight. So on queen d4, the plan must be to play f6. Right? That must be the plan. The final barrier. F3 gets played. And looks like Arjun might just go for the technical solution here, right? Might just be going for the endgame. Okay, so if queen e3 here, you can trade queens and then play rook c6 and probably just win with a back rank mate tactic. Although rook e2, rook d6, rook e1. Yeah, so here we go. Oh, he's just going to win a pawn on f6. And that is relatively easy, technically, I think, for white to win now. And white's got lots of time. Should bring the king to the game. Ooh, yeah. Bortnick says no to the king, right? Does not want that king coming up. But I think king e2 looks okay. Complicated. More complicated. The rook trade comes in. Uh-oh. What a tactic from Bortnick. The rook trade into knight b3. Recovers that pawn. Oh, this is a mess of an endgame now. You're going to want to keep the knight from going to e2 by coming through that square. The king's got to come all the way around to a3 to try to win this game. Covers knight c1. It's tricky, though, if king b4, knight d2, right? How to do this for white. Oof. Oh, man. And g5 instantly from Bortnick. What is going on? Bishop b2 possible? Here it's going to go knight e5 to pick up the g4 pawn. It looks like black might be okay here. g6 is a good move, though, now. Yeah, and Arjun finds it. Kicks the knight. It can't go to e5 here because bishop b2 wins. What a moment for white. The king comes across and gets into great position. This position looks probably lost now, although it's a close call. Try to eventually zugzwang out the knight. Oh, what a move. Knight takes e5. He couldn't take it because of the g-pawn. And this is a draw. Wow. What a save by Bortnick in the final seconds. What a save. That endgame's tough. That's the kind of endgame I would love to be able to win, even with low time for white. But it's hard to be 100%. And I mean, if you had 1 minute on the clock, you would win that endgame for white. But with 10 seconds, it's kind of a toss-up. Okay, this endgame here, rook and 2 pawns against rook, is a draw in a classical game. But I would guess, I'm just guessing, that in a blitz game, black's chances are poor. I think the player defending is the one who most misses having time on the clock. Now that king is cut off on the rank from this pawn. Gets pushed back, has to come up. Rook check, king over. I think the king has to come out this way. But he's not. But Rachmanov doesn't seem confident of a way to get out of this. Rook h6 is losing. Don't go for that if that's what you're thinking about. King g3. He's going to come back down. Don't take because of rook check. Now rook check. King stays centralized. Good call. f4. The pawn can finally advance. No, he gets another space with the h-pawn. That was clever, but now there are stalemate tricks. Rook h5 check, and then rook e5. Just check him anywhere he goes, huh? If the king went to c4, then you can't play rook c5 check. Here you can just play rook e5 check. What's the problem? Why doesn't he go for it? That's confusing. He had the crazy rook available, right? Just rook e6. What? What's going on, Min? Okay, now the rook's got to go to a1. And it does. This, folks, is called the long side. You need the rook on the long side where it's got room to check the king without getting counterattacked. And you need your king on the short side. And here, if king g7, I think black can take it, and on rook g3 check, king h4 is the saving idea. Wait, the black king has been chased out. Black allowed the white king to g7. That should be losing. And black loses on time. So check here, here. Check. What's black supposed to do in this position? Probably, I don't even know. Oh, that's why you need more time to be the defender in those positions, right? And the game goes to white. And now we are going to get into round 7. Let me show you guys the full standings for a second. Here we go. You can see there are 2 players left with 6 out of 6, and they are SEO Robert and Maevsky. We need to go find SEO Robert and Maevsky right now and check out these people here. Nikolai Maevsky and SEO Robert. Wow. Up on the top board. Ahead of a pack of super GMs. A pack of super GMs, including Alexander Bortnik, who we just saw winning in round 6. What do we think of this position? White's got this amazing center. Black's trying to tear it apart with f5. I like the move f5 a lot. Oh, black is just trying to crack that e4 square, and it feels like they will be able to eventually. But here e4 is defended just enough times. It's hard to even count it, right? Black's attacking it 3 times. White's got 3 defenders, not counting the knight on c3. That's not truly defending it. So what can black do here? Maybe fe4, fe4, knight g4. With the idea that on bishop g1, you play like queen g5 and prevent white from castling in either direction. Okay, black just castles, which gives white a chance to do the same. White should go queenside immediately, and SEO Robert does. I mean, ultimately, white can be slightly better sometimes in this kind of a position if black doesn't come up with something concrete, right? Eventually, white can save this pawn structure. Okay, black trades while the queen probably can't take because of taking on e4. And so they create like a little gap in white's pawn cover around the king. If queen b2 here to trade queens, then black's going to be able to get the pawn on e4. White did go queen b2 though, and black doesn't trade and take the pawn. What? What's going on there? You're too good for my pawn? Black already just dreaming of checkmate? That doesn't make sense. But I also don't like the move e5. You need this pawn on e4 to stop this knight. But I guess your pawn's hanging, so that's the question black's asking, huh? Well, in that case, maybe white should have considered something like d5, pawn takes, pawn takes. to have better like room for their pieces. I'm just going to throw one interesting idea out for you since I don't like this move. Anytime you think that a move's not the best move, you need to be able to suggest a better move. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with the move. Okay, this is a very, very important thing to understand. If you're ever going to criticize a move, you need to be prepared to suggest a move that you think is better in that situation. If there isn't a better move, then it just means you don't like the position, not that you don't like the move. Shouldn't SEO be pronounced so? I don't know. Depends what he had in mind when he made this account name. Depends what Robert had in mind. Jungmin So. So So isn't his name. Yeah, you're probably right. It's probably So, kind of like probably like Wesley So. Thanks, Romani. All right, and what do we think of the position? Black's got the full light square blockade. White's got the huge center. And I think that it's probably about equal. I think it's probably about equal. Oh, except, I mean, I hadn't calculated that pawn going. I was just turning my eyes back and hoping to get like a general eval here. But there was a pawn hanging, and White chose to sack it. So that's more complicated than I thought. I guess I'm going to have to mildly favor Black with an extra pawn. Notice they play e takes f to keep this rook blocked. White needs this pawn on h5 very, very, very badly to get into this game. Because they're down a pawn, and they can get slow maneuvered by this knight. Should we trade the bad bishop and play c5? No, White has rook c4. Don't do it. Don't do it. Going into that rook ending really depends on playing that c5 move, which doesn't work tactically because of rook c4 from White. So, okay, so rook e6. He's going to bring the rook to c6 to help control that outpost square again. And White's going to want to throw this pawn right now. It's time. Oh, no, there's knight c4, and you can't go to a4 because of knight b2. So Robert plays rook b1. You're right, Robert. You're right. Good move. Here you can now play rook a4. That was important. You had to do that before h4. You're right again, man. You're right again. b5. Okay. That's going to back that rook up to a2. Man, look at those rooks being used by Maevsky on c6 and d5. And now White finally throws h4, h5. Maybe it didn't help to play rook b1. Maybe it didn't help. There goes the rook there. c5. Increasing the threat of playing knight takes d2 at some point. So White brings the bishop up. Now the king could always take and cover this pawn. And White's bishop gets out. That's good news for White. I don't know about that. From Black. And White gets in the move h5. I think White's still just barely holding the line here. I mean, it's a tough position to play, right? The knight's outmaneuvering your bishop and you're down a pawn. But I think White's done just enough to stay in this game here. Yeah. Black's going to need to play a5, a4, like, at some point here to win. They're doing, like, a lot of, like, super maneuvers, but... Ooh. So they're looking for knight c6 and trading off that bishop now. What's the plan if White attacks the g6 pawn a couple times? Yeah. I mean, trading the knight for bishop, spending 3 moves on that does not help because White's busy breaking apart your king side, and they're going to play rook f6 as well. I think if you never move this pawn, your position's just not good. And then b4 walking into bishop c5 doesn't help either. White is completely winning now, probably. I mean, this e-pawn can go here, disrupt the rook here. I would have thrown an e6. I think it was time. Time to win. It was winning time. Right? Okay, Black defends the 7th rank. Can White play e6 here? Again, if you're never willing to push it, you're never going to win it. You have to be willing to like find your moment and go for it. Rook f6 looks crushing. A5, who cares? Watch out. Watch out for knight d4. White does watch out for it. Good lad. As I think people in England might say. All right. Now the king should come up to e4. Then we can get back to pushing. Beautiful. King on e4. I now give you permission to push. Yes, knight on a5. That's great news for white. This is done. Strange direction for the king to run away, but should be no problem. f7, f8 should come in no matter what here. There's some risk of like a stalemate this way. Rook e7 or a7 to a8 is good enough. There, now picks rook e7. And then you can just go take the knight. Yeah, that's clean. That's clean. And then rook back to f8 and take the rook. Nice! Bravo, Robert. Who would have thought that Robert would win that endgame down a pawn with eventual h4, h5? I think black's problem can be traced to never having pushed that past a pawn down the board, right? They let white have the time to play h5, trade on g6, bring both rooks to that side of the board. So I think, yeah, I think black really needed to play a5, a4 at some point much sooner in that endgame. All right, the two pawns and a rook endgame. How to win this one? Looks like black's close to winning it. Now the king can get up to... No, rook takes b3! And king c2, and there it is. We will never know how to win this endgame because black didn't know. All right. So that's the end of round 7, I think. Or this one's still going? Okay, this one's still going. Does black have checkmate here? Queen f3 boxing the king in. Now g5 in that position. Queen h3, king h3, queen h1. Oh my god. Missing the checkmate, and white defends. Folks, look, you need to be able to give checkmates. Here's how you do it. G5, king here, here. I mean, I think that's like the basics of blitz chess, is seeing little one-move checkmates. Wins the queen with a different little tactic. I mean, the same g5 move at some point. And there you go. That's the end of round 7. We got one more round before the break, before the next break. This is going to be round 8 out of 11. And let's quickly take ourselves to the standings to see whose game we need to watch in this last round. Who's winning? Oh, yeah, it's still SEO Robert. So let's go check that out. It looks like Vladimir Dobrov is up at the top of the standings as well here. So SEO Robert is playing Hans Niemann now. And Niemann with the Queen's Indian defense, looking to trade a piece and keep control of the e4 square. But does Niemann know that SEO Robert has hardly made a mistake yet today? Double white for Robert, very convenient right here. But probably compensation for a double black earlier, I would guess, because that's how pairing systems work. Has a FIDE master ever won Title Tuesday? I don't know, Arun. I would think that Sviridov has won Title Tuesday, and Sviridov technically is an NM, a 2500 player who just hasn't put in the GM title application. Is it fair for Hikaru to win every tournament? If he's good enough to win them all, it's fair for him to win them. There should not be a limit for wins. Absolutely not. Absolutely not, FN. I'm going to completely disagree with you. I think whoever can win should win. But tell us why you don't think it's fair. You know, you're free to explain your concept to us. We'd be happy to hear why you think there should be like a limit on how many times somebody can win. I assume this would also apply to Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship matches and stuff like that. Ooh. Hans wants to get a look at the white king here. Pushing forward. I think it was also playable for Hans to trade on e4, knight e4, and then play queen c6 right there. But pushes forward, wants an attack, and white immediately opens the center because they want the center open if Hans is going to be looking at their king. That's normal. Anytime your opponent's going to be looking at your king, you're probably going to want the center open to try and distract them from it. But here's a long think from Robert. Queen c6, how to play it. Do you want a pawn on f3? Do you dare put your knight on f3? Probably not. I would say knight f3 looks bad. So king g1 is the choice. And now Hans is going to have to remove that knight. They're fighting over who gets control of e4, you know. So that's what it's about. Knight goes back to d7, kind of passive, looking to come to c5 and control e4, but Robert's too fast with queen e4, takes Hans to the endgame. And confident in the grind after that last win, right? If you win a pawn down endgame, folks, it does wonders for your confidence in your endgame. So Robert has just won an endgame down a pawn. Will be feeling very good going into an endgame with equal pawns right here. And up comes the king. Can Hans put his pawn on f3? It will eventually be very weak, but it will keep the white king at bay for a while. Just blockades the queen side for the moment and holds strong. Yeah. So the players with 6.5 out of 7, there are 4 of them. There's Vladimir Dobrov, there's Arjun Erigaisi, and there's Niels Grandelius. Along with Hans, who we're watching here. Goes for a bishop trade. Robert declines it. I don't think that Robert would mind a bishop trade. What Robert would mind is the A file opening. Hans could take back with the A pawn, and then this A2 is like quite an annoying weakness for the whole game. I guess also E5 would be hanging to the knight, so he'd have like a lot of stuff to worry about. Yeah, so he has to keep that bishop to defend the pawn. Back and forth they go. King comes up. Hans has sacked the F pawn, and Robert has taken it and said, prove that positional pawn sack. We're in an endgame. It's going to be hard to prove. Bishop b4. Probably just going to back up again. But now that the e5 pawn's protected and the a pawn's on a4, white could definitely have taken if they wanted to. It was definitely a significant option there for white. Knight's coming to f5. The game looks very, very close and tight here. And the bishop changes its mind from b2. It's just so hard to decide who actually wants this bishop trade. Caruana has just beaten Pragnananda. There's just too many of the most talented players in the world are playing in these things. What happened here? Rook e8 and white lost on what? I don't know. How did white lose here? On time. Maybe Prague got disconnected or something. Rook e8 and lost on time. It's unfortunate. Back to SEO Robert. Here we are. And see how this endgame's going. Hans has the knight on f5, is down a pawn, but the pawn is, a backwards doubled pawn, so not huge danger at the moment. Only just the danger that either player could get outplayed easily at any point. The only danger is just how good the opponents are. From like a positional perspective, both players have acceptable positions at the moment. Yeah, basically a loss to internet, that one, unfortunately. Call him Jung Min. All right, we'll call Robert Jung Min. I mean, he chose this name, Robert. It's not me who chose his name for him. So Yeah, their full name is given. And by the way, everybody has to play on an account where their full name is publicly given to play in Title Tuesday and be eligible for all these hundreds of thousands of dollars of prizes that Chess.com gives out through this series of tournaments. So everybody's identity is confirmed, which is one of the strongest deterrents to cheating, which I know is like in the back of the minds of most of you, but I appreciate that you haven't spent the whole day talking about it. So good on you to not let it just bubble out nonstop. All right, Hans trying to run the king to h2. I still remember the moment in Searching for Bobby Fischer where Pandolfini asks Max Pomeranc, right? Josh Waitzkin, which pawn is the weakest pawn? And he says, the pawn on h2, only his, the isolated pawn on h2, only his king can protect him. Or whatever. I forget his voice. It's been too long since I've seen the movie, right? But this is the weakest pawn on the board in a lot of cases, not the doubled pawns, but the isolated pawn. Only his king can protect him. Oh, wait, there was knight c5 right there, right? Knight c5? I guess they'd already done that once. Knight c5, king c3. Okay, so he's looking for new avenues. Hans is looking like that f-pawn is terminal and looks like he's won this game. Looks like black has won this game. He can move the knight around and play g5 with his king on f5. That's one good way to win the position. Now he's going to force the king back to f2 to protect the bishop. No. White goes for the breakthrough with b4. The problem is black's pawn is closer to queening than white's. And the knight is in range of the pawn. Hans takes it. Takes it. Keeps his king centralized. Win by resignation. Jungmin, that was a fantastic run. Super impressive run. Finally, Hans Niemann takes over the lead in this tournament. Let's just go and see where the knight for bishop was traded. So in this position, knight d4 from Robert. This is the move we're going to call very, very risky. It attacks e6 and prevents king f5, but it forces Hans into trading into the knight versus bishop situation, which I think is really, really a bad position for white. Hans certainly converted it really convincingly from there. The top games are already done, so we can check out the standings while we watch this queen endgame play out. The standings now at the top, we've got 3 players with 7.5 out of 8. They are Arjun Erigaisi, Hans Niemann, who we just saw win, and Grand Delicious Niels Grandelius. They're followed by SEO Robert, who we've been following for like 3 or 4 rounds now. He's been leading this tournament in front of all the GMs. And Jospim and Kirill Shevchenko and Markon, who I'm not sure who that is. Looks like white has won this queen and pawn ending while I read the standings. And that brings us to the end of round 8. My friends, it is time for another short break here in the action. We'll be back with the thrilling final 3 rounds to find out who will be crowned champion of this early edition Title Tuesday. If you're just tuning in now and 3 rounds isn't going to be enough for you, there's a second edition this afternoon starting in 3.5 hours. So there'll be a whole nother one. I will see you very soon after this short break. Take care. All right, everybody, welcome back. Here we are, round 8 about to kick off. We've got Hans Niemann versus Arjun Erigaisi here. What a battle. What a matchup between two of the most promising... Ooh, the Benoni coming back. Two of the most promising 18-year-old chess players in the world. Not the two most, two of the most, because there's one other 18-year-old who figures in that equation. But these are definitely the number 2 and number 3 18-year-olds in the world right now on the FIDE lists. I can't decide who to root for here. It's just too exciting. Let's just see who's got what it takes. Better than no Deerbeck at the moment, Emo Suji. Somebody in chat must know who the top-rated 18-year-old in the world is. Somebody must know. All right, so he must have again played e6 on move 1 to get into this Benoni. Knight on e7 here instead of f6. Yes, that is right. It is I am a fan of Lulwa, is the highest rated 18-year-old in the world. No, Super Ginger, you've got the correct answer. Alireza Firouzja is the only 18-year-old who is higher rated than the two 18-year-olds we are watching right now. This is basically the ideal matchup for me for today. Of all the matchups that could happen today, this might be the one that is the most exciting. White gives up the bishop pair. No, Hans, no. You can't do that, my friend. Oh, no, you can't. I'm going to tell you right here. I'm not in a calculating mode. But at my surface level, just sort of glancing at the position and seeing who's got what pieces, you cannot give that dark squared bishop like that. How old is the GM that just won the Wake Challengers? Jay Beast, exactly as old as Gandhivam 2003. Exactly as old as him. Because this is him, Jay Beast. That's who we're watching right now. Arjun Erigaisi is playing black in this game. And he is the one who just won the Wake Hanze Challengers and will be in the A section next year. All right. That knight on c8 is bad, but things are going to have to go really badly for black to make up for that dark squared bishop getting traded off. e5 comes in. Yeah, that's a tricky move. That's worrisome for black. I feel like black needed to coordinate on the knight and the rook. Vague feeling. Queen e3. Now black's in like a fight where like none of their pieces are defended, you know? And on this move, this is hanging, which is why in this position, I was thinking rook b8 for black here when we were in this position. That's what I was thinking. I recommend it to all of you in the future. This bishop is eyeing your b7 pawn secretly. It really is. So rook b8. Okay, so here we go. The knight comes out. The light squared bishop is coming through. The d6 pawn is strong. And yeah, Hans is doing fine now. He's completely made up for giving up the dark squared bishop with this e5 pawn break. Black's position is a bit rough here. Knight to d5. Potentially winning the exchange. You don't always want to win an exchange in the Benoni. Sometimes it's better just to like take this pawn, post your bishop on c6, keep the opponent under pressure. Depends. Or maybe even like the move f5 could be really good. Actually, f5 might even be like a top move here. Just keeping this bishop from coming out, keeping this knight from getting this square. Your bishop comes like this. You soften these light squares because you've got bishop d5 coming. And you'll notice that the computer engine, the eval bar, approved. It said f5 is correct. I mean, it even went up from 1.7 to 2.1. That's how good the move is. But okay, knight d5 happened, queen trade, knight c7, and Hans wins the exchange with knight d5 to c7, but now has to like convert a tricky endgame. That b pawn looks pretty good. Bishop d8 is forced here, so white's got time to deal with the b pawn now, at least. It's not defended by a bishop on b2. So what are we looking at? White wants to just try and win the game right here. So black's going to have to sack the b pawn now and trade rooks, pretty much, right? They're going to have to trade rooks and play b2 just to keep white from playing rook e8 to d8. So that's a nice move from Hans. So black's got to trade the rook and then play, let's say, either king g7 or b2. And then white can play rook b1, and black can play king f6, and rook takes b3, king e6, or king e7. I think black might still have enough to draw there. But Arageisi finds some other option. Rook e6, blocking the e-file, and trying to leave space for the king to walk over here more easily. Hans presses the point. He says, no, we want the e-file open. He's going to use f5 to try and force that. But Arjun could also just play rook e7 when f5 comes. I don't know if that was worth the tempo, but we'll see. Oh, wow. Now he makes the trade and then pushes. Could Hans play f6 here? No, he can't. Okay. He's probably just going to play rook b1. No, he plays some other weird move. So what does black want to do now? Bishop f6. Odd. Hard to understand. I mean, there's so few pieces on the board, and it's still hard to understand what the priority is for each player. I understand Hans's priority now, getting the king going. Okay, black threatens a4. He seemingly has to... Oh, he does it in the wrong order. He does it in the wrong order, and black's winning. King back to d8, and that is game. Can't stop the a pawn. Oh my goodness. That's why Arjun played bishop f6, to set this trap. Wow. Hans is going for some kind of swindle where his king comes up to d6 to defend this pawn, and then he plays like rook g1 and tries to back rank mate. But he gets backed up by Arjun, who can now push them home. And make a queen on a1. No, resignation. Brutal. That was such a tricky position, too. Let's check out Grand Delicious and Jospim, also playing for first place in this one. Jospim is down 3 pawns. Oof. No bueno. And it's even same colored bishops. That means that the situation is hopeless. Hopeless. Today is going to be Niels' day as the pawn comes in for a touchdown. Niels is at 8.5 out of 9 and will be playing for first place until the very, very end of this tournament. Queen and knight versus queen and knight. G5 is vulnerable and C3 is vulnerable. Those are the spots to keep our eyes on. Black maneuvers in, looking at one of them. Trading looked unpleasant. Black tries to make a pawn break. Bring the knight. Look to make a pass C pawn eventually. King E6 to defend the pawn. And the plan is something like knight to C6 and D4 eventually, I think. Okay, white decides to abandon passive defense and go for a perpetual, like knight C6, queen F6 and stuff. So gets the queen active. Seems like a reasonably good defensive idea. Position's super tricky. Queen comes in. I don't know who's trying to win or who's got confidence in their last 3 seconds. Knight H3, queen F4. No, the knight on E5 is defending the queen. There's no queen F4 trick. Back and forth they go. And now E3 would be logical to make space for the king. Black makes the pass pawn. I think white could have played king c2 there if they wanted to. But maybe it just doesn't matter that much. Knight on e4 looks pretty strong. Uh-oh, the king's coming up to c3. White's trying to Zugzwang black now. No, they just make a trade. Okay. Good enough. Good enough for a draw. Man, they play it out all the way, though. They've got ice water running through their veins, these two. Nobody's offering a draw. I believe there's no rule against offering draws in Titled Tuesdays. I don't think there's any anti-draw rules in place. These players are just confident making their moves rather than, offering draws. Just move the pieces and see what happens. And we are into round 9, folks. Who do you think is going to win based on what you see so far today? Who do we think might be winning? We've got a tie for first place right now between these two. Arjun Erigaisi playing the Reti opening against Niels Grandelius. And then half a point behind them, we've got Kirill Shevchenko, top Ukrainian junior. And then we've got several good players on 7.5, including Robert Hess and Alexei Sarana and Gawain Jones and Hans Niemann. But most likely it would be one of these two leaders who would end up winning the tournament, right? With 2 rounds to go. Hess is playing. Hess is up here in the leaders. You can see his name. So the c4 pawn is eventually taken by Niels, and we're going to get kind of an English if white can recover that pawn. What does white have to do? Like a5? No, white just has to sack it long term. In theory, that shouldn't be correct. I was looking at the standings for a second. Let me just track how this pawn was lost. a6. So here takes, here a6, a4 to cut off the defense. Knight c6, and now castles. Here, and I think this move is actually terrible, Arjun. Don't you need to like play queen c2 and attack the pawn and or knight a3? I don't think you can just play knight c3 here, because then there's like no way to attack that pawn. So then you just play down a pawn. I mean, it's playable. You've got like Banco / Sicilian / English opening style pressure here, so it's not like you're losing, but you are just down a pawn. I mean, your compensation for the pawn is having like a file that anytime you lose a pawn, you've got a file. That's like the minimum compensation. It's still not considered good to just not have pawns. Arjun learned Catalan from Srinath. They probably know this. If they know this, then they know it's bad past pawns. And it's some kind of like, well, maybe we'll play this in Blitz one day idea. But this is not good. I can't imagine there would be any GM in the entire world who would think that white has an advantage out of this opening. Who would like purposely want this position as white. I can't imagine that such a GM exists anywhere. Now, I'm not a GM, so how am I supposed to imagine GMs? But I've been around some GMs in my life. That's my guess. Okay, so the knight outposts on d4. White maneuvers the knight. Similar plan as in the English or Sicilian, which is to put a knight on c5 anyway. That's sort of like the main plan. Now maybe queen e7 to try and control that square, but then there's queen takes d4. So Grandelius defends the d4 pawn. And yeah, the question is, when this knight comes to c5, will it be threatening to take on b7 or not? Normally I guess black will probably defend with bishop d5 once the knight's on c5, right? Be a way to defend this pawn pretty easily. Bishop d5, weaken white's king, rook to e8, and eventually you get counter pressure on e2. Like if white had a pawn on b3, I think GMs still feel they can defend this position for black. And this is basically like a position that would be familiar to any GM, but with the pawn on b3. Or sometimes you have doubled A pawns. Sometimes you've played b takes a3 or b takes a4, and you can have the same position. Okay, I'm wrong about bishop d5 because the bishop moves to f5. An odd square, sort of biting on the d3 pawn, so I'm not sure what that's about. I would have thought useful moves are moves like rook e8 and bishop d5. But we'll see. Does white even want to put the knight on c5? White goes after the d4 pawn from the side, and Niels says, yeah, just trading that piece off. Supports the passed pawn on d4. Interesting situation. White's light squared bishop is pretty good here, right? There's like chances to go queen b3, bishop d5, and have this bishop be better than the opponent's bishop. So I could see like how white could play this position now for sure. And then like if you could put the a4 rook on b6, I would like that, or b7. Queen c2, interesting. Oh, just getting out of the way so that you're actually threatening to take on b7 by having a rook in front of your queen. And the queen can also hang out on c4 to keep these pawns blockaded and pressure that square. Hey, a rook on b6. White's position looks very pleasant now. So maybe a mistake from Niels to go bishop f5 and bishop takes e4. I mean, if you think of what he did, what could have been wrong? If this position's now feeling pretty good for white. Anytime you feel like the position's value has changed, then you want to like ask yourself like what were like the big decision points and like which one might have been the wrong one. So this opposite colored bishop position's feeling okay for white, and that tells me that maybe bishop f5 takes e4 was the wrong approach from black. We see a small shift in the standings. Kirill Shevchenko has won already his round 10 game, so he will be playing the winner of this game next round for all the marbles. Well, not all the marbles, because, you know, the prizes are divided over many places. White recovers the pawn on b7. 25 moves after sacrificing that pawn. That was a long, long, long time. Queen b8, looking to play an endgame. Yeah. Probably a good idea because the middle game's bad. No. Trade the queens, I think. Why am I wrong about that? Why wouldn't black want to trade queens in this position? That feels much more drawable. He's thinking his queen's making this threat on a5, and that's somehow an improvement for him. But here, white could take the c5 pawn, right? And then a6 is still hanging, but white doesn't. White retreats here. That's hard to understand. Looks like we are getting an endgame anyway, and Niels is going to probably be able to hold this. I mean, they played this well, but also this fast. It's so hard to understand in time what the players are up to. Black's made room for the king to come to f6 now. The bishop retreats to defensive posture. Interesting. Rook d7 with the idea of like bishop d5 at some point. Bishop e4 for now. It's like a mild disadvantage for black, but nothing like super scary. Wait, the h4 pawn is sacrificed. You can take that, Niels, and Niels knows that he can take that. And he's still willing to just take a draw, so Arjun's just going to take that draw now as well. After the rook trade. Is there anything still that could go wrong? Could that h-pawn slip past? You got to keep this pawn here to block the bishop's diagonal from which it wants to defend. Okay, they're still playing. I think this bishop should just keep its eye on f5 as it is now doing. Oh, there's a path for the king. It can come into e3. It can eat some stuff. It can truly eat some stuff, but it looks like it might still be a draw. Yeah, it looks like it might still be a draw. White could even play f4 if they want to. Oh, yeah, take the bishop further away. That was clever. By c4 was this one big threat that could have won the game. Now in this position, you can sack the bishop for the pawn, and it's still a draw because it's the wrong colored pawn. He was looking for a trap where he plays f4 and wins the game. You know it. So tricky is Arjun. He's like, maybe I could just still win this game somehow, right? But no, it will end in the obligatory draw. And I don't know which of these guys is going to get paired with Shevchenko next round. But there's going to be 3 players at least tied for first place here in the last round. Let's check out Alexandra Goryachkina winning by checkmate in the endgame. That game is already done. We're going to assume that queen was a new queen, like a pawn that queened in an endgame. Let's see if there's any other games still going. Anna Kramling playing Title Tuesday with a couple extra pieces here. With a couple extra pieces on the board. Should be a simple game of push the B pawn, but instead we're getting a lot of pieces shuffling around. I really rely on pawns to tell me what's going on. So Now the B pawn's moving, I understand what's going on again. Arjun played the first 2 rounds for Amrad. Arjun's been in all the way. He couldn't have 10 points out of 11 if he'd missed 2 rounds, could he? The knight blocks off the file. That's a good technique for queening a pawn. Dilshad has like incredible resign refusal. Incredible. Really, really, really will not give up this game. Now he's going to test the checkmating ability of rook, knight, and bishop. I would sack the rook and then just checkmate with the bishop and knight. Just be like, come on, man. What is this? Okay, the white king gets back to the center. That's bad news for black. Some major struggling from black, and the black king runs away from the white king in terror. Wow. Wow, black doesn't know how to checkmate with all these pieces. Yikes. Get it over the edge. Yes, got the king to the edge. Oh my god. He's going to try king a6. No. It's locked in. It's locked in. The checkmate is found. It was not easy, so practice your checkmates, folks. Make sure you know how to checkmate with a rook or a knight and bishop or anything like that. And here we go into the last round. It looks like Arjun and Kirill are paired against each other, and we also need to keep our eyes on Niels. Let me find Niels' board as well here, folks. Niels is playing against Robert Hess. Woo! Yikes. That's possible, Hug Magoose. That might have been toying with. It's possible. I don't know for sure. So, in theory, Hess or Gawain Jones, Verdenut, could still catch up for first place as well, even though it's most likely to be one of the players on 9 points. If Hess beats Niels, then all he needs is the game between Arjun and Kirill to end in a draw. Not a very drawish position so far. Very, very complicated position. My take is that she wasn't. I'm with Kavin, but I can't know for sure. Okay, the white king's not going to be able to castle, but it'll be fine on, like, you know, king g3, right? Why not? Go hang out in that pocket. Go hang out in that pocket. And again, he's got this c6 outpost for the knight. But here with the pawn on e4, the bishop on g2 doesn't control it as directly. So it's not as easy as the advantage in that other game with the knight on c6. Still, c6 is the best square on the board for white. That's like the focus of white's advantage, is the c6 square. And Kirill didn't see the previous game because knight d4 sent Kirill into a 40-second think about, oh shoot, knight c6? I didn't know about that. So queen e8 is played to get out of the way of knight c6. Also the queen's eyeing this knight in case some tactical something or other comes up, and he's looking to play e6. Yeah, I think knight c6 is a mistake, for sure. But white goes for it right away. The thing is, like, yes, you need this outpost, but if you go there too soon, black can fight against the pawn chain that supports it, and your king is on this e-file with multiple undefended things. So I would have definitely played king f2 in this position. And here comes Kirill Shevchenko with knight e4 check, and what is white supposed to do? On, like, king g1, there's knight g3 already, like, just ending him because of undefended things. If bishop e4, queen e4, the queen's all up in his business. He's probably going to end up settling for bishop takes e4. What are the other options? He's settled for it. This position's very, very dangerous for Arjun right now. Very, very dangerous. Light squares are cut across. Those are missing squares for his rook and queen to use to defend things. Bishop on e3 is in danger. Queen f3. A queen trade would cover everything. A queen trade would be perfect. Can black play like queen d3 or something and keep the tension going? Black goes for knight f6. So, Arjun, you've got the queen trade if you want it. You've got the queen trade if you want it. And that should give you much better saving chances. But black's planning to play bishop b5 in that endgame too. Or in the middle game. All right, I think Arjun has stabilized this. Let's check out how Hess is doing. Good position for Hess. I think he played b3 if I remember correctly at the start of this game. Yeah. So for b3, this is a very good position. You know, flexible center, some pressure from the bishops, some pressure on these squares here. I think Hess is giving Niels a very tough game. Probably tucking the king on a2 is useful. And the other big question is if you're ever ready to play d4, you know, and open up the bishop and this threat of d5. Because black had a lot of pieces on this diagonal, but I guess this was always going to be black's escape valve. If white threatens d5, black just plays g6 to take the bishop off that diagonal. Yeah. And Robert taking all the pieces off. That should reduce his advantage significantly. If he had an advantage. I think rook h8 into two pieces traded means his pressure is mostly dissipated. And they're offering a draw to each other. And we'll see if Robert wants to play this out. I mean, tournament standing wise, Niels gets so much more if he can somehow randomly win this, that you would think, like if he were just playing based on like money odds, you know, he would just keep playing even though it's a dead draw. But he has no interest in doing that. He's played a good tournament. The game is now boring to him. He agrees to a draw, and he'll wait to see if one of these players can win this endgame. It looks like Shevchenko has won a pawn. Let's see where that happened. It happened with the c3 outpost right here. Choice of pawns, right? a4, d5. Takes the better one probably. And heads back to maybe take the other one too. Knight e4, knight f2. Yeah, black's up a pawn. White's got plenty of drawing chances still. The d pawn not being that strong just yet. Yeah, we are in the final round. This is it. If either player wins this game, they will win this title Tuesday right here. It doesn't look like white can play knight d4 because of rook d8 if they trade on e8 first. But can they do it leaving the rooks on the board so that on rook e2, king e2, and on rook d8, rook e to d2, they can. So Arjun gets rid of that pawn deficit and has his best drawing chances that he's had ever since he put the knight on c6 too soon. And his first threat in ages is rook to e7. But for some reason, it's not being played. Now rook c3 is threatened. Uh-oh. And he just played that move super fast right there. Now black can take on f5 and keep playing. No, gets the bishop out that way. Okay. Ooh, getting tormented. Getting tormented here. And that is a new extra pawn for black. Shevchenko, that b pawn looks really, really deadly. White's got some chance of getting some kind of a perpetual against the black king here. Black needs to get that b pawn queened. No, this is not going to do it for white. This is not going to do it. The b pawn should just queen now. In any scenario, black can sack the bishop on f6 as needed. And there's just nothing for white to do. Yeah, block the B file. That is it. Shevchenko is going to win Title Tuesday, folks. Boom. Wow. Good technique in that final phase. Let's check out one of the other top players we haven't seen yet today. Gawain Jones drawing an endgame by Perpetual here. Jackie and Zubov finishing out the Title Tuesday. Another queen ending. I really need to learn queen ending sometime soon. It's going to be so fun, and it's so needed. Just moving around, moving around. Is there a winning plan for either player? I think even if queens trade, the game is a draw. Like neither white nor black really would have any way to win that. And so that more or less brings us to the end of Titled Tuesday. For today, let's see if we can catch one or two more end games. We've got Didici winning here for white in the bishop endgame against Chigayev. Impressive. Didici has continued to improve, clearly. I was curious what this tactic was where the pawn... I guess it's not even a tactic. The pawn just started advancing, you know. Very nice. So let's go check out a game without an extra queen, if there are any of those left. Attila Turzo is checkmated. David Howell with the opposite colored bishops. They have a minute each. What are they going to do? Try and play the longest game of the tournament? They're playing super, super fast here. I mean, it's like pre-moves almost. Maybe indeed pre-moves. Are they spelling out the names of their best friends on this board? It seems like their kings have like a purpose or a meaning or an idea to them. All right, I think the chess.com server cut them off. They said that's enough. That's enough. So our winner today, Kirill Shevchenko. And let's go to the standings. Let's just make them bigger for a second so we can congratulate everybody appropriately. Kirill Shevchenko with 10 out of 11. And right behind him in sole second place, Niels Grandalicious getting second place, sole second place. I don't know exactly how much money that is, but probably a good chunk. 9.5 out of 11. And then on 9 out of 11, Bogdan Deac, Robert Hess, Gawain Jones, Arjun Erigaisi, and Mickey Tarian. So congrats to all those players on their finish. Let's just check. This was the decisive game for today's tournament. Let's just have a quick replay on the game of the day. It was a King's Indian defense from Shevchenko. 4-pawn attack. Make that 5-pawn attack from Arjun. Whew. There is another Title Tuesday coming up today in 4 hours. In 4 hours. I may have said that wrong at some point. At 2 p.m. today. Do please join us at 2 p.m. today for the next Title Tuesday, which we will have Amon Hamilton here to comment. So Arjun with the 5-pawn attack, feeling very, very aggressive. Black strikes with b5. Liking the Benoni. Gaining some space over there. Knight d4. And this position, it should be pretty strong for white if they just get the king out of the way, put the rook on e1. And then eventually rook c1 and focus on c6. But the knight came to c6 too soon. And this ruined Arjun's endgame. And from here on, he had to fight back from a bad position, though he did successfully at a couple points. There were twists and turns. But the knight on c6, it controls some good squares. It's on an outpost. It doesn't keep black from playing around it. And this bishop b5 move is allowed that knight d4 would have prevented. Black got onto the e file. Very good defense by Arjun with queen f3 and manages to hold the d5 pawn and avoid like total disaster for a while. Hold the knight on a4. Right, and eventually got into this position here, losing 1 pawn. Like so, but all he needs to do is win back this d5 pawn in this messy position to get an equal position. And he does. You know, d4 is tried and it's not quite sound. He's able to take it. He avoids, d4 was probably played by Shevchenko with the idea that in this position, he would get pinned and tied up here. But white didn't have to make the trade. White just takes here, and if black goes rook d8, this rook can come to d2. And if black trades, then after king takes, the rook's defended. So Kirill just had to say, oh, there went my pawn. I have to just go back to trying to win this position off of maybe the bishop's better than the knight, or maybe some of these pawns are weak because they're advanced. And he just tried to win the whole thing again. Brings the rook somewhere active. Here, I wasn't sure about this option of rook to e7 at some point. I mean, it seems like black would probably have had to play rook f8 and tuck their rook in, and then white could take the a7 pawn and play knight e5 and put a rook behind the b pawn. It should be about equal, I think, at this point. I'm not sure, though. But that was my thought, that Arjun had enough to draw here. And I think what went wrong for Arjun is coming up in a moment. When rook c8 is played going to c3, suddenly black's going to be super, super active. White's going to have to go passive to defend the knight, and black's going to have time to pick up, you know, one or both of these a pawns for free. So I think white missed their chance with h4 and rook b7. Just a little bit too much time where this rook needed to come up and be active, threaten f7, and even on rook c8. You know, you could play rook c7 if rook takes f7 isn't good enough, but I think it is. So when this rook came to c3, now Arjun was basically in like a losing situation. Again, one pawn dropped, and there's still defensive chances, but it's really hard with the outside pass b pawn and the bishop. The knight can't get to the queen side, and eventually Shevchenko cleaned that one up, won the game. Typical blocking of the file to queen, and that's how he took Title Tuesday. So everybody, that's our show for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we did all right. I'm sorry that I offended one person with my comment about the checkmating technique last round. But other than that, I think we had a pretty good day. If anything else I said offended you, please let me know. I love to know about the different ways in which I have offended people, so I can, you know, figure out what I need to change and what I need to do more. Yeah, if you learned a thing or two, then that's perfect. I'm super happy to hear that. I was hoping that like 1 or 2 points in all this excitement would also have been useful for somebody. But hopefully, I mean, it's mostly fun, right? So there we are. We have finished the first half of today's Title Tuesday. We are in the year of 2x Titled Tuesday, right? Increased prize fund, $250,000 in cash prizes over the course of the year. 2,500 were assigned just now. Another 2,500 will be assigned this afternoon with Aman calling the shots. And tomorrow we'll be back to the FIDE Grand Prix. So enjoy that. Take care, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful chess day. And I'm off to do some chess training myself. That's what's next for me. I'm gonna go work on my chess. Do some practice positions with my friend and training partner, Kostya Kavutsky. So I wish you all a day as good as the one I have before me. Bye.